Today's video is going to go over grammar. I know that that is everyone's favorite subject, but grammar instruction really does matter. And unfortunately, it's something that's not explicitly taught much anymore, and even when it is done, there's not enough practice or purpose tied to it. And honestly, too many people rely on sources like Grammarly and Google Doc features that mark errors for them. These are not always correct, especially when you're dealing with more sophisticated or stylistic skills. It is important for students to know when to ignore these suggestions. Additionally, I find that a lack of grammar knowledge can impact students' reading and writing skills, especially when examining classic literature and evaluating rhetorical and syntactic choices of authors. Now, some of you right now might be like, whoa, I'm just here for some basics, and that's okay. I just want you to know that it is important and it does build. So with that in mind, this video is going to go over the basics, the parts of speech, and subsequent videos will review additional skills and terms. For example, I'm just going to talk about nouns today, but I'll have another video later that talks about collective nouns and plural nouns. And we'll sort of go through each of those skills in a little more detail. But everything in grammar really comes back to these 8 parts of speech. So you might be wondering, what are these 8 parts of speech? So we have nouns, verbs, pronouns, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections. Again, we're going to go into some of these in more detail. Now, conjunctions in this video, I do give you a little bit more to than with the others, but that's just, it's important. So we'll just go through those. All right. As you may know, a noun names a person, place, thing, or idea. So some examples would be the teacher, the living room, the lamp, or freedom. Verbs, we use our verbs to express an action or state of being. Hop, run, drag, is, was. And there's different types of verbs. Again, we will talk about those in another video. One thing to notice, important with grammar too, is that you need a verb to have a sentence. So you can have a sentence that's just a verb. Stop! That would be an example of a sentence that's just a verb. So it is the one part of speech that can be a complete thought, because we have the understood noun being you for the subject. Anyhow, back to just the basics. Pronouns take the place of a noun. So she, her, they, I, him, his, it. It is important when you are using pronouns that it's very clear what noun this is referring to. Because a pronoun takes the place of a noun, you need to have the antecedent. And we'll again go in those into detail with that in another video. But just keep in mind that if you're just starting out with the basics, you never want to start with just a pronoun without having first said whatever the subject matter is that pronoun is then going to replace. Adjectives describes or modifies a noun. So beautiful, dainty, strong, greedy, small. Those would all be examples. Adverbs. I often have students struggle between adjectives and adverbs. So I try to remind them that adjectives only modify nouns. Adverbs do pretty much everything else for modifying. So they can modify a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. A lot of you may think of adverbs as the ly adverb, and we often do have a lot of adverbs that end in ly, but not all of them do. So it's really important that students understand that not all adverbs end in ly. So some examples would be slowly, very, calmly, best, better, next. Prepositions. It links a noun to another word or phrase. So about, above, below, beside, from, to, there's many more. And some of them don't always follow with my anywhere a cat can run. So there are exceptions. The wonderful thing about the English language is that we have rules and then we violate our rules. So there's always exceptions. And with prepositions, I like to teach students that anywhere a cat can run. So if they think about a cat running around, a cat can run atop something, it can run below, it can run beside, it can run to, toward, from. So it's just a good little saying to kind of help your student figure out where a cat can run, and then that's probably a preposition. Conjunctions, these join clauses or words. Types of conjunctions are coordinating, subordinating, correlative, and conjunctive. Now, Coordinating conjunctions are the ones that you are probably most familiar with. These conjunctions connect or coordinate equal elements of grammar. So equal is the key word here. So for example, words with words, or phrases with a phrase, or a clause with a clause. So apples and oranges, skipped and fell. And so I often use the acronym FANBOYS for our students to try to remember which ones are coordinating conjunctions. Now you have subordinating conjunctions. And the root word for the sub means below. So these conjunctions connect dependent and independent clauses. So an example would be, because of a broken arm, Josh could not play in the basketball game. So why couldn't Josh play in the basketball game? Because of a broken arm. So we could have moved this dependent clause to the end, but when we have it in the beginning, we're going to have a comma distinguishing between the two. And then you have a list there of subordinating conjunctions. Correlative conjunctions come in pairs, and they demonstrate a contrast or a matching idea. So we will go either to the mall or to mini golf. So you should always have the pair. So either or, neither nor, not only but also, so as, whether, or, both and. Next, we have conjunctive adverbs. These conjunctions are in fact adverbs, but their function in the sentence is as a transition or demonstrating the relationship between separate parts of a sentence. I was eager to go to the mall, however, everyone else wanted to go to mini golf. And we'll spend more time working on these later, but just so that you know that these are considered conjunctions and they're adverbs. Interjections expresses a strong feeling. These tend to be the easiest, like, oh, ouch, hi, hey, and they end with an exclamation point. If I were going to put this all together, I would say, I patiently watched the little snails move across the sidewalk. So I have my pronoun, I. Okay, patiently is my adverb here. I patiently what? I watched. All right, what did I watch? I watched little snails, so this would be an adjective. I don't know if I can get the DJ. Kind of stuck that together with my D. All right, so pronoun, adverb, verb. Little snails. Snails is a noun. All right, what did these snails do? They moved, okay, and they moved across the sidewalk. So here's my preposition. I don't have any conjunctions or interjections here. Now, some of you may wonder, what's going on here with the? Why wasn't the marked? So we have the snails, but we have an adjective, so the little snails listed there. But a, and the are articles, technically adjectives, and they'll let you know that a noun is coming. So that is the 8 parts of speech. As you go into other grammatical concepts, they're all going to come back to these foundational elements. So it is important to know what the 8 parts of speech are, because as you're learning gerunds and participles, you're going to come back to this idea. Now, some of you may be wondering, what are some grammar resources to even teach some of this stuff? And these are some sources that I have used. I have used other ones in the past as well that are not listed here. And I just want to kind of give you a little overview if you are looking for resources, that these could be things that you might be able to use. But ultimately, you'll have to find out what works best for you. So Holt, a long time ago, had Elements of Language. I don't believe they publish it anymore. I happened to hold on to a copy as my school had been throwing them in the trash one year as they were done with them. And I really like, if you can find an old Holt Elements of Language, there's a textbook and it has practice in there, but you can also find where the PDF version of the workbook is still online, and a lot of it's for free. And so I find it as a great resource, and that it helps to teach some of the grammar concepts to students, and they have that visual. But then there's also practice in there, and there's a lot of practice with Holt, and so that's something that's really good. And so the practice is specific to whatever the skill is. So if you're working on, identifying simple and compound nouns, for example, or subjects, then you can have a lot of practice that's on that one skill. So it doesn't necessarily repeat multiple skills within the practice, but it has a lot of practice for that one particular skill that you're looking at. Sadlier has a grammar for writing, and so I did use this for several years. I liked it because it was a simpler format for students that we were able to use at the time to have instruction and examples on the grammar concept that we were working on. And it had some unique practice where they were not only identifying, but they were applying what they were doing. And so I really liked that. The problem, again, for me was that there wasn't enough repetition. And ultimately, for whatever curriculum that you use, you want to find something that has a lot of repetition. So whatever you don't use, you lose. So lots of practice and repetition should be your goal for whatever resource you choose. Sim has a fundamentals in sentence writing strategy. You would I'll put a link in the notes, but this is something you would have to actually do training for, unless you can find an instructor who is trained in this, who'd be able to assist you. And the fundamentals in sentence writing strategy is really meant for elementary students, and then it can also be used, and I used it for struggling readers when I was a reading specialist in middle school. And so I found it really helpful because it has that repetition. So you start really basic about capitalization and punctuation and finding just the noun and the verb. And then the skills slowly over the course they build. And what's really important with this strategy, especially if you're working with either young children or children who are struggling readers, is that it has an I do, we do, you do. And there's multiple pages and boxes of practice. And so if your student gets it the third or fourth time of practicing on their own, you don't have to use the others, but they're there if you need them. And so I just found that a very helpful strategy when I've been working with those types of students. Bob Jones University has the writing and grammar curriculum, and that again is a great curriculum. I really enjoyed that one as well. But that one, like where the other ones were not enough, this one was almost too much. And in the framework of the classroom that I work in, it just didn't fit. I currently use Institute for Excellence in Writing, which is IEW Fix-It Grammar, and I actually love this because it gives an example practice that we do every day in class. And so with this, the students are getting that repetition. We're repeatedly looking for nouns, verbs, pronouns, adjectives, adverbs within the sentence. And then as the concepts build and become more complex, those are being introduced, but they're still having the repetition of the other things. So we haven't moved on from ever finding nouns again, or ever finding verbs, or ever finding any of those other parts of speech. We're still doing that as we are building in new skills. So I love the fact that it's repetition. And honestly, I use IEW in conjunction with Holt practice. So if there's a skill, like we really struggled with who, which clauses, I will go onto Holt and find some examples sheets in there. And so we'll build that skill, but we're still having the repetition of the other skills. And then some of you have probably seen the digital platforms for iExcel and No Red Ink. These are great resources that are out there, especially if you don't want to grade their grammar practice. And so this will self-grade for them. But you have to be careful for your student. So some of them don't go and read the directions, or they don't read the instructions and the lesson there. And so they'll just keep doing the practice and do poorly, or just guess and get lucky. And sometimes without direct explicit instruction, they can feel like they're in a level of Dante's Inferno and they're like never going to get out. So there are plenty other resources out there. You probably know some that I didn't mention. And like I said, there's some that I didn't mention. But hopefully this is a good start for you and your family.